CultureCast.
The power of the leader's action is so much more important than the power of the leader's words. They pay attention to what you do, not so much so in what you say.
Hi, and welcome to Deep Leadership. I'm your host, John Rennie. Well, I hope all is well with you today. It is another beautiful day here in North Carolina, and this episode is brought to you by our sponsors, Leader Connect, Ignite Management Services, and Liberty Strength. These sponsors help me bring these shows to you each and every week, so I encourage you to click on their links below and check them out. Now, today we're talking about the secrets of organizational culture change, and my guest is Manoel Luiz Amorim. Manoel is a seasoned business leader and co-author of the book, The Secrets of Culture Change. He compares culture to the religion of business, emphasizing its role in guiding actions and decisions within the organization. Manoel also explains how culture and strategy must align for optimum performance, and he shows examples of how misalignment can actually hinder innovation. Now, I enjoyed this important discussion on culture, and I know you will as well. So, are you ready to dive in? Let's get started.
Welcome to Deep Leadership. Leadership is a people business. That's the philosophy of your podcast host, John Rennie. As a former Cold War submarine officer who spent 20 plus years leading businesses in corporate America before starting his own manufacturing business, he knows that leadership matters. Are you ready for some real-world actionable advice from John as well as his expert guests?
I'm ready.
The show starts right now.
Welcome to the Deep Leadership Podcast. Today I'm joined by Manoel Luiz Amorim. Manoel has served as president, CEO, and partner of several companies in different sectors in Brazil, Latin America, Europe, and in the United States. He is a founding partner of MXF Investments, K2A Partners, and he is a partner with K2A Partners. He has served on several boards of directors in different capacities. He is the co-author of a new book called The Secret of Culture Change, How Building Authentic Stories Can Transform Your Organization. And in this book, Manoel shares important lessons from business leaders who have successfully achieved culture change. And I'm excited to have him on the show to learn more about how to create a successful and sustainable culture change. So, Manoel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor to meet you, and I'm excited to talk about this subject. You know, culture is very important, but we haven't really talked about it a lot on the program, so in almost 300 episodes. So I kind of wanted to get you on the show to talk about it. So let's start off with that. Can you explain what organizational culture is and why it's so important to organizational success?
Sure. Well, I would compare culture as the religion of business, of an enterprise. It's the set of values, set of beliefs, set of norms that help people take action, direct on how they should act within the organization, and also how decisions should be made. It is very important, and every organization has one. Sometimes it is described in the business documents of that organization. Sometimes it is not. Many times it is not. But every organization has a set of values and beliefs by which it operates.
That makes a lot of sense. And when you think about that, I like that term, the religion of business, because it's sort of like the rules, the norms, the values of what's important in our organization. How are culture and strategy related? How are these two connected?
Okay, the culture, we like to say that is the way for the strategy to be translated into action. If you have a mismatch, and I'll give you some examples between what your strategy is and what the culture is, the performance is going to suffer. In fact, Professor Peter Drucker, who is known by many as one of the gurus in strategy, says that when culture and strategy are not aligned, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Because at the end of the day, what's going to be done is not what the strategy says, but is what culture leads the employees to do. So you have to have that alignment. Also, several pieces of research have demonstrated that when in the firms where culture and strategy are aligned, they tend to outperform their competitors. I'll give you an example just to illustrate. Let's assume that a company has come to the conclusion, leadership of the company has come to the conclusion that it needs to be more innovative. However, if the culture up to that point has been one that punishes mistakes, that is very hierarchical, position-based hierarchical in nature, a company is not going to be innovative because people are going to be afraid of making mistakes, are going to be afraid of trying. And trial and error many times is what brings innovation. So if the alignment is not in place, it is very difficult to implement the strategy in order to have the two aligned. It is very important to understand what kinds of traits and norms are necessary to be in place for a given strategy to be well executed. And by the way, there's not a right or wrong culture. Culture is not something that you can define and generalize. It is something that derives from the strategy that a company has defined for itself.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I love your example of wanting to be an innovative company, but yet the culture is one of, you shoot the messenger, you fire people who make mistakes. And, I work for a company like that had a very, it originally started off as a very innovative company, but over time became bureaucratic. And so the innovation fell away as people were just following the rules. And so the innovation was lost. So I think that is a great example of how, culture has to be aligned with your strategy. So one of the questions I have for you is, why is it so difficult? Because a lot of strategic efforts to change a culture, they fail. And then why is it so difficult to change a culture? And again, having done it myself, it is very difficult to do. So tell us a little bit about what the challenges of changing a company culture is.
I think there are three root causes of why it is failure in changing a culture is a more common event than succeeding in doing culture change. First, because you're dealing with beliefs, you're dealing with values, you're dealing with norms. It's almost as difficult to change the culture within an organization, especially when it's a deeply ingrained culture in the organization, than changing one's religion. You're dealing with things that are deeply ingrained as a set of beliefs and norms in one's soul, in one set of norms and values. That's one root cause. It's difficult by itself. The second reason is because leaders don't know how to. If you read all of the books that are written about organizational culture, there are hundreds of books about changing an organization's structure, which is very different from culture. A lot of other books about processes on how to do the organizational structure change, but almost nothing written to the practitioner on how to go about changing a culture. So that's reason number two. And the third reason is many times because the values will change, the way that people are evaluated and valued within the organization will also change, which will affect the status quo of many individuals. And people tend to resist when that happens. So imagine a place where the hierarchy is based on positions. Higher managers have larger offices. They make more money. They tell what needs to be done. Into an organization where the hierarchy is an ideas-based hierarchy. So good ideas are not the property of senior managers. So, eventually the junior leaders in an organization may come up with an excellent idea that nobody thought about. That organization will then value, if it's a culture that values or that bases the hierarchy on ideas, all of the symbols of position-based hierarchy will tend to disappear over time. And that will affect those who are higher up in the organization. And the resistance is a natural consequence of that. So 3 reasons. It is difficult by itself. Managers, for the most part, don't know how to do it. And third, it affects the status quo of a number of individuals who will be enemies of the change.
Yeah, change in anything we do is difficult, even if it's something changing to the better. We as humans hate change. So we struggle, we hold on to that status quo as long as we can. And so that's one of the challenges with any change process within a company. And culture change, as you mentioned, it's sort of like the religion of the organization. So your fundamental beliefs about who we are as a company are being shifted. And so that's a big, big change. I know one time I had an opportunity to bring 3 different businesses together under one roof. And so we had the existing business and 2 businesses that we moved into the plant, and each had a distinct culture. And I was trying to create one culture. And that was the hardest thing I ever did as a leader, is trying to bring those 3 cultures and align them into one new culture. And it was difficult for all 3 groups of people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So this new book that you have, it's called The Secret of Culture Change. You look at you investigate over 150 examples of business leaders who have achieved lasting culture change and significant and important changes in their culture, which led to better performance. Can you give us a few examples of those stories?
I can, but if you allow me, let me tell you how the idea for the book was born.
Sure.
I was working for Procter & Gamble when I had my first major leadership assignment in business. In 1998, Procter & Gamble completely restructured itself from being a geography-based type of organization. Each country had a subsidiary. The subsidiary had a president or a general manager, and he or she were responsible for making all of the big decisions in the business. There was very little central command and control within the organization, except for a few areas. And P&G, I'm going to call Procter & Gamble from now on as P&G for simplicity, decided to change all that and to create a different structure centered into 7 global business units. And each one of those 7 business units would have a general manager for each one of the 4 geographical regions: North America, Latin America, Europe, and Africa and Asia. So there were 28 business managers, general managers, who were responsible for the entirety of each one of the business units in those 4 regions. And I was promoted to general manager, and I was responsible for the baby care business, which was 90% Pampers at the time, for Latin America. And each one of those 7 business units had a president. And we were all new to each other, because in a reorganization of that kind of magnitude, you will eventually work with people that you have never met before. So he had under himself a leadership team of about 7 people, the 4 general managers, but plus some of the functional managers. And he wanted up front to define what the culture of the new business unit was going to be. So we went on an offsite for 3 days. He invited the guy who was at the time the business guru on the subject of culture. I don't even remember his name. Very interesting individual. And we spent the first half day trying to answer the following question. How can you tell the culture of an organization? And there were all kinds of ideas, debates, and questions and answers. But at the end of the day, the conclusion was, you define or you understand the culture of an organization when you listen to what the employees are talking about in the cafeterias, in the aisles, when they're having informal conversations. What guides their conversation is what defines the culture, because that's when they share their beliefs, their norms, their excitement, the news of what's important to them. So that was interesting, but not very helpful to me at that time. Until I had my first meeting as a general manager with my direct reports team. We had a weekly executive meeting, and I made a big mistake. It wasn't intentional, but it was a big mistake. I am absolutely obsessed with starting meetings on time, and we were there, almost all of us except the human resource director. We started the meeting. The guy got in about 15 minutes late. And when he entered, he said, "Good morning." My response was, "Good afternoon." It was totally disrespectful. It was public. I did not have any idea of why he was late, but that's what I said. I quickly forgot about my answer, but during the course of the following week, I discovered that everybody was talking about my lack of respect and how disrespectful as a leader I was. So then I connected those, the discussion on culture to my mistake. I quickly realized in a conversation with that same director that the organization pays an enormous amount of attention to what the leader does.
Yes.
And what the leader does becomes an important part of the conversations. So then I made the connection, said, okay, so I have a big part in defining what the culture of this organization is going to be, because if they're going to talk about what I do, and if I want to lead the building of the culture in this organization, I have to do things that are consistent with the new culture, that motivate people to behave in the way that we want the culture to be. And I made that connection, and I spent the rest of my career, about 16 years, as a CEO or a general manager, changing cultures, because the nature of the assignments I had required me to change culture.
We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsors. As a leader, you're responsible for the mission and the people assigned to you. Regardless of the size of your team, employees are depending on you for their lives and careers. For the sake of your team and the people who entrust you with this role, you need to master the skills to become a great leader. Best-selling leadership author John Rennie is proud to introduce the Qualified Leadership Book Series. This new series teaches you how to become a people-centered leader. Great leaders know that employees who are respected, appreciated, and allowed to grow will go the extra mile. These books provide real-world leadership wisdom written from a hands-on perspective. If you want to be a more effective leader, this is the one book series you should read this year. This 3-book series contains the following best-selling leadership books: I Have the Watch, You Have the Watch, and All in the Same Boat, for one low price of $39.99.
Begin your journey to become a leader worth following. Go to johnsrennie.com and get your order in today.
This episode is brought to you by Leader Connect, a leadership training company and video platform founded by the leadership book author and Deep Leadership Podcast guest, Neil Jerd. Leader Connect is a video and podcast streaming platform for leaders and teams. Watch it alone or as a team, and each video supports you and your team, allowing you to improve performance and build a great culture. Join hundreds of experts and learn about leadership, planning, public speaking, team building, mindfulness, and a range of other subjects that will help you lead well and build a great team. I'm proud to say that I'm one of the experts on this platform. Leader Connect is offering a 10% discount to all Deep Leadership listeners. Go to leader-connect.co.uk and enter the code DEEP at checkout. Master your leadership with Leader Connect. This episode is brought to you by Ignite Management Services. Ignite is led by Mike Watson, who you might remember from episode 137. Mike and his team believe that everything starts with leadership, whether it's strategy execution or cultural transformation. It's the role of the leader to create the conditions for their people to succeed. The team at Ignite can help you develop critical habits to enhance your leadership capability and transform your business. Ignite Management is now offering the Resilient Leadership Assessment Tool. This is an online questionnaire designed to assess and guide leadership development, coaching, and team building. It provides leaders an opportunity to gain insights into their leadership strengths and development needs. After taking this assessment, you will receive a custom, detailed report that provides practical and actionable recommendations to enhance your effectiveness. I have taken this assessment myself and found it to be extremely valuable in helping me make changes to my leadership approach. Right now, Ignite is offering 15% off the price of this tool to the Deep Leadership audience. Go to ignitemanagement.ca and enter the code START15 at checkout to get started today.
I met Professor Jay Barney. Professor Barney is the third most cited scholars in business strategy. We attended the same church, attended at that time in 1999. And one day after the services, we were talking, we introduced ourselves to each other. He said he was a business professor. I said I was a recently retired CEO. We got interested and invited me to have lunch. Over lunch, I talked about my career, about the fact that I had to do several changes in the culture of the organizations I led. He was very skeptical. He said, look, I've been in this studying businesses for 30 years, and all I know is that culture cannot be changed. Then I challenged his thinking. I gave him examples. He said, well, this is interesting. We got to write a book about this. But before we do, as a professor, I need to tell you that we need to do some research and find out if the methodology that you just described to me have been applied by other business leaders with a similar degree of success. And so that's how the book started. We started to do the interviews. We had a very diverse base of interviewees, gender-based diversity, geographical diversity, industries, different industries and different sizes of businesses. And we found a lot of commonality on how the leaders did it. That's how the book was born. So now, back to your question, can you give me some examples? I can give you, if we have time, I'll give you 3. If we don't, I'll give you less. But one great example is actually from a good friend of mine. His name is Alberto Carvalho. Alberto was assigned at one point in his career as the global, developing markets business leader for the Gillette brand, for the Gillette business, which is a huge business. It's pretty much everything outside of North America and Europe, where most of the population, who, by the way, also shaves almost on a daily basis, except for a few geographies, but certainly where Gillette sold more blades in the world. And how he transformed the culture of that organization from being a research and development type of culture. How do we make the most efficient blades in the world that leave almost no trace of any beard in men's faces, into an organization that was not as obsessed about the efficiency of shaving, but very focused on consumer habits. That's a very interesting story. It became a front page article in the Wall Street Journal. It became a case study in the Kellogg Business School. That's one story. One example. The other example is from Melanie Healy. Melanie was the first female vice president for the feminine care business of Procter & Gamble, which is a huge business where Procter & Gamble had a leading market share, very difficult to have in any consumer products business. They had a 50% market share. And she changed the culture of that organization from being a culture focused on efficiency, on producing good products, but at the lowest possible cost, into a culture of delighting the females, almost the women, almost as if they wanted to be to have a period, to use Procter & Gamble's product, if you believe that was the mindset. And she did it. The business went in just 5 years from having a 50% market share to a 60% market share. And the behavior of the organization had to change to achieve that. And I have my own personal story on how I changed the culture of a large telecommunications company in Brazil that had been just privatized, from being very disciplined in terms of having an efficient operation. It was actually one of the top 3 most efficient telecommunication operations in the world, as measured by lines per employee, into a consumer-focused, into an innovative company, because when the industry was privatized, the monopolies were lost, and the markets became competitive markets. So these are 3 examples that we reflect and that we illustrate in the book. I can get into some interesting details here if you want to hear.
Well, first of all, I want to say one of the things I like about the book is the fact that you are combining, you have a professor there, right? So you're combining the academic and the practitioner, experiences, right? So it's interesting because, the first thing that the business professor says is that can't be done. And then the practitioner says, well, actually it has been done, and let's go find some stories. And you guys end up digging up, more than 150 stories of cultural transformations. One of the things that's interesting in the book is you summarize, you basically find these, you call them these 6 attributes that create a successful culture change, and that they were common in most of these stories. Can you tell us a few of those attributes that were common in those turnaround stories?
So the thesis of the book, before I give you the attributes, is that it is through daily actions that portray the culture that one wants to create. They need to be the first and most important step that a leader can take to change a culture. These actions by the leader, which we call the stories the leader builds, they have the power to educate the organization about the culture. They have the power to demonstrate that new culture actually works in delivering good business results. And they're going to be talked about in the organization. And they can motivate and inspire as well. The power of the leader's action is so much more important than the power of the leader's words. They pay attention to what you do, not so much so in what you say. So what we found is that, for instance, and I'll give you a very quick example about the Gillette's case. You know, they did not have, the top leadership of the company did not have a lot of interaction with consumers. When they ran consumer research, for instance, they were failing big time in India, a country with over 1 billion people, a lot of men who needed to shave and actually did shave almost on a weekly basis. He could not find a good answer of why they were failing. They had ran consumer research with the Indians living in Boston, going to MIT and other schools, or living in London, which has a large contingent of Indian immigrants. But those were not representative of what the bulk of the Indian population is like. So about a week or so later, after he took over, and not having satisfactory answers to his questions, he said, fine, I am going to India. And that was unheard of. I am going to watch men shave in India. And they said, what? You don't need to do that. We have, research companies that can do that for us. He said, no, I'm going to India. And then once he decided and bought the ticket, the entire leadership team, decided to go with him. They spent a week waking up at 5 a.m. in the morning, going into slums where most of the people in India live, watching men shave. And they found out very quickly why their product was not working. The leadership team became so excited that in the trip back, they started to discuss how the new product needed to be, how they were going to change the manufacturing processes, what were the things that they were going to give up in terms of performance to allow their product to perform well in India. Bottom line, the following year, they sold 100 million blades. 1 year, which was more than 10 times what they were selling before. And the entire culture changed into a new culture that would observe. It was the job of a leader to observe their consumers, to draw conclusions, to let the consumer lead the innovation process. This was a process reapplied in several other companies, became, as I said, a front page subject in the Wall Street Journal, studied today in the Kellogg Business School. And so what these guys, these leaders who effectively changed culture did was create powerful stories to lead the organization into a new culture. These stories had a number of things in common. One, they had to, they starred the leader. The business leader was the star in those stories because, people talk about what a leader does. They need to speak to the heart and to the minds of the employees. They not only had to make and to allow the employees to understand why the culture was needed to change, but also would motivate them to want to have that in their day-to-day. They had to break with the past, but also point into a future, a different future for the company. Many times they were theatrical, meaning that it is something so different than what was done before that becomes the subject of talks. So Alberto going to India, waking up at 5 a.m. to go to a slum to watch a guy shave is theatrical. It's something heroic. It's something that other leaders have never done before. So these are some of the examples of the attributes that we have found that the stories built by leaders have in common. And the book is illustrated with 38 different stories.
I absolutely love that. I love that story. I love that the idea that leaders' actions are so much more important than their words, and the idea of these theatrical events. I'm going to get on a plane and fly to India and watch people shave. It creates the rumors get started. The word gets saying like this is new. This is different.
Yeah.
CEOs don't do this, and so I think that's the great example of this story is that a leader can change a culture not by their words but by their actions. What do they physically do? And I think that's a great example of this idea of powerful stories, creating these powerful stories.
A lot of people say that we need to walk the talk, but the leader needs to have his walk talk.
Yes. Oh, I love that. Have your walk, do the talking. Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely. Well, this has been fantastic. Great conversation. I want, what final message would you like to leave with our listeners on the idea of culture change?
I once heard that things that are important, things that are, they change the course of an organization or of a business. They don't need to be complex. They are generally simple. It doesn't mean that they are easy. They are many times difficult, but they don't have to be complex. They are, for instance, coming up with the design of an iPhone. Every new version, I get amazed on how simple, how easy it is for the user. In this last version, I just had to put my new iPhone by the side of my old iPhone. That was it. And press a button. And everything was transferred. I mean, can anything be more simple than that? But it wasn't easy for them to design such simplicity, right? So in business, it's the same thing. The decisions don't need to be complex. They're usually simple. Doesn't mean that they are easy. And my message and my convictions got even stronger after I wrote this book with Professor Barney and then later with Carlos, that the power that a leader has through his or her example is something that most leaders underestimate. So don't underestimate, if you're a leader, the power of your behavior. And if your behavior is conscious in leading an organization into a given direction, try to make it public. Try to make it known to the rest of the organization without crossing the dangerous line of being proud or being cocky. But make sure that your behavior is public, your beliefs, your actions are seen by the rest of the organization if they reflect the values and the norms you want the organization to follow. There's nothing more powerful than that.
Such a great message, leaders. I hope you heard that. I hope you take it to heart. This is such an important part of leadership and about driving what cultures we want in our business. So absolutely great. I really appreciate this message. Manoel, how can people find out more about you and this new book?
Well, the new book, The Secret of Culture Change, can be found on Amazon. You just type the name and it's going to lead you to the page where you can buy it. And people can find me on LinkedIn, Manoel Amorim. Manoel, and my last name spells Amorim.
Absolutely. We're going to put links in the show notes for all of Manoel's resources so that you can find him. And again, I highly recommend this book for some simple reasons. One is, again, what Manoel said, which was your behaviors, your actions have a larger influence on the organization than you can ever imagine. If you want to change the culture, your actions have to reflect that. What I love about this book is all the stories and the fact that it's backed up with the academic side as well. So it's the combination of practitioners and an academic approach. It's going to give you the answers you need to build the culture you want in your organization. So, and while I really appreciate you coming on the show, sharing this book, sharing your experiences and the stories in the book, because I think it's going to help us all be better leaders.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here talking with you.
Well, thank you again. Well, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership. If you like this podcast, please subscribe and share so we can continue to build a world with better bosses. Until next time, this is John Rennie saying take care and lead well.
Thank you for listening to Deep Leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for all you do.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information and updates, please visit our website at www.deepleadershippodcast.com or johnsrennie.com. Until next time, take care.
Welcome, explorers of the human experience. This is Let's Talk Soul, and I'm your host, Claudia Monticelli. We're not afraid of the great mysteries of existence here. Soul versus consciousness, we're on it. Spirituality versus science, we've got that covered too. Join us in navigating these profound topics with wisdom, curiosity, and a dash of audacity. Whether you're a spiritual veteran or just starting your journey, Let's Talk Soul is your passport to the unknown. Let's Talk Soul, diving into the depths of the human spirit. Subscribe now wherever you get your podcasts.
Are you a fan of classic cinema or a young person who wants to discover the best films of all time? Do these legendary movies still hold up?
On the Generation Film podcast, two guys who grew up when movies dominated the culture share a great film with a panel of young movie lovers and see how it plays for today's generation.
We discuss changes in storytelling styles, representation,
The making of each film, its initial reception, and how its meaning has changed over the years.
Join us as we explore cinema classics across generations on Generation Film.
Electric acid.